So next up, let's look at some of the go-to-market strategies. And again, these are to give ideas, and these are generalized basic strategies and thinking without going too much into any specific business model or any specific industry or market or so forth. So more about scaling perspective, and if we think about scaling, it means that we are looking at global market, we are looking at going bigger. So therefore, let's look at the strategies that come out of that. So born global is a concept where and a terminology used for companies that don't take the typical organic growth path and the traditional way how businesses have grown historically in the past, in a longer history perspective, where first you do your own home market and then you grow there as big as you can, and then you start slowly to open a new market, perhaps a neighboring country or countries, and you establish offices there, and you grow that way, and then next country and so forth. But born global is of course specifically with everything that internet has brought and all the digital business opportunities, is that you look to build it can be even a quite niche product to a specific need, but in a very global way. So this creates this whole different dimension of how to think global business. So it doesn't mean that you have to have a big business to do global business, and that's where the terminology comes from. So born globals are business organizations that have just a global mindset from the very inception, and aim to derive significant competitive advantage from the use of resources and the scale of outputs in multiple countries. So this is really to doing a big market thinking and big market, not necessarily big market entry, but at least big market availability in a very globally minded way. So basically, born global firms begin exporting their products, or in a digital world, making the product available to with a couple of years after their founding, and really majority of that business, at least a significant portion of that, comes from businesses outside of their home market, and that's where the term exporting comes. And typically this also involves more open models and more strategic models for partners and investments and so forth. So here's from Gabrielson research or document about this from a past, just kind of describing this born global growth thinking. So the internationalization and globalization aspects, and really how a size of a company develops. So it's getting very quickly into this internationalization phase at very early stage, and then really looking at that globalization to spread and blanket more of the markets very fast as it grows. And basically this gives also a perspective with the thinking of really getting into that global mindset and global operations very early on, and not so much of that internationalization, one market at a time perspective. So if we think of born global and really like making your products available. So there's two aspects of this that will go through. That is the key strategy. One thing, of course, is to try to get to all markets, to try to sell to all markets. So that's obviously clear that as a small company, you simply can't do that. You can't make yourself present everywhere. You can't make your products and services fit to all of the different cultures, on all of the different languages, and so forth, and the early on. So you still need to choose the markets that you proactively go after, or that you proactively support. But at the same time, you should not limit your product or your business growth potential by clearly excluding some of the markets simply because you assume that the customers, that you need a better product or you need a certain model to even have customers. So basically, it means that make your product globally available, make it as neutral as possible in a general level, and then consider separately where do you do more targeted market activities and more features and functions that support specific country, language, culture, and so forth. But at the same time, don't block your product away from those who are foreigners living in another country, or they are willing to and interested or even used to buying products online with some of the common languages, or if the same language is used in multiple countries, then that's easier. But really think of it that way, that like imagine if Google would have, when they came up with the service, that they would only make that search engine available in their home country, and when you try to type google.com, it just says not available in your country. That would be basically exactly like not really considering so that anyone can at least access and use the product, but you may then communicate that we are providing some limited support of that. And I guess in a global business, a lot of us experience that of, for example, in certain media, what media is available that to like try to watch some movies or videos, and they basically are not available in your markets, or you start to look some products that you want to buy online and then they don't deliver to your country, and so forth. So all of those are basically coming from the old world and the old ways of how businesses were considered. But in the modern world, at least the direction is clear, and growing majority is expecting to get anything that is available somewhere that they don't understand why wouldn't it be available also elsewhere. So then the consideration is how can you make it available, or at least at what level can you make it available elsewhere. But that's a different consideration than what market you are proactively going after, where you put more effort behind to actually get customers from that specific market. And there are even cases like, for example, Facebook's and any of these big ones, and even some of the less known companies that have got like just random surprising growth from a country that they have never even heard or they have never considered. And then they just look at their statistics or KPIs and they wonder, why is our product so successful in that kind of market? And there can be just that there has been some media coverage, or it may be that there's just a lucky match with the culture aspect or something that is common in certain countries' culture, why a certain product resonates very well in a country that it was never really designed for. So these are the types of aspects that you should have strategies in place. And when we look at the born global versus the internationalization and basically with this we mean that being globally available versus the intended proactive expansion by country or market by market. So of course it's about each countries have their different scenarios, or whether they're developing countries or they're more mature countries, or whether they're more innovative or whether they're more conservative regions. There's appearance on the products and services. There's the mindsets of people, how they consider certain types of services, who they would buy them from. Then of course the language considerations, cultural considerations, even things like internet access speed, or let's say also a latency. If your service is provided from a country very far along, the online service may be very slow in a country where they're accessing it. It's also what kind of devices and technologies they have available, what are the preference use models for type of service that you're using, whether it's more an office desktop setup or whether it's more mobile. It may vary even culturally. For example, in some of the countries, people use Facebook for everything and don't really use LinkedIn, for example. And in some countries, you wouldn't mix LinkedIn and the business profiles and behaviors with your Facebook behaviors and so forth. So that just gives a sense of the type of market setup that is different in a different country. So even if you would try to do business communication and use LinkedIn and you're getting good results for that in a certain market, then on another market you may actually learn that nobody is there from that country, but everyone's also conducting business in Facebook or in their Facebook profiles. So also considerations of how you support with local teams. So the people who talk the local language, understand the local culture, and how would you support business there. And these are more the considerations of how much support you provide, or just simply making the product also available. Time zone considerations, like how can you effectively operate the business, or where you can effectively support the business considering where your team is mainly located at. How can they support customers in a totally opposite time zone? So these types of considerations you start to have with the global aspect. And then the management models, how do you manage the growing aspect, and specifically also from this global perspective. So while in principle and in practice also making something born global or making global business is actually, on one hand, it's much easier than many think, but at the same time it includes these different aspects that also many don't think. So this just means that it's good to have a certain strategies in place that take into account the opportunities and possibilities to let the company grow and scale to different markets and find interesting opportunities, versus then the strategy of what markets are we proactively going after. So if we think the mindset, how to build the mindset for Born Global, so traditional, this internationalization business aspect and more traditional business thinking usually have studied that, of course, you have your own home market, and in the beginning you focus on your own home market and servicing them, and then you have made perhaps some foreign language or more common global language pages available to make your products and service available also for others, but you haven't really considered their customer experience or their user experience of using or accessing your service or product or products from your location, because your own mindset is very much shaped by the local business that you are doing in one market. So that's kind of how you are, how a traditional business may be thinking. And there are a lot, you would be surprised how many businesses there are in the world that actually don't do any business outside of their home country, and they don't even deliver any of their products or services to another country. There's I don't know for a fact, but I would say majority of companies are like that. Or if they have, it's a very side activity how they do the international business. Or even if they have it, then the user experience or customer experience may be so bad that even if they want the product, it's almost impossible for them to get it. Now then, the other aspect of this is, of course, that if you really start to think of, okay, let's go international, let's go to different markets. So then it becomes a question of, okay, to what markets do we go? Okay, to what group of countries or what set of countries are we supporting? How are we getting there? How do we have resources to support it? All the different considerations, but this is still starting from the mindset that you are physically somewhere, that you are a country X based company and you are country X based brand and image and so forth. And that's also something that you have to separate, or it makes sense strategically to separate and consider, does the country label give you benefit or not to associate it with your business and business communication? So it's not automatic that it actually is beneficial, but at the same time you want to make sure that you are getting benefits, whatever your country is offering and what they are supporting businesses that are based in your country and growing out of the country that you are in. But when you're building a global business, at least over time, you should be shopping around the same way for the country of where the business makes sense to be present, like you would choose your mobile operator. It shouldn't be that much different. If you're building a global company, think of what type of country gives the best kind of support and profile that supports your business, considering the type of business you have. Certain countries and certain regions have certain profiles where depending on the type of business you're doing, may be more beneficial to represent that kind of country profile. At the same time, you can still be setting up operations in any country you feel where your team wants to live or where you think there's the best talent available for that and so forth. So think of these in different aspects. And for communication, you can make your company location-based appearance very neutral. You don't have to communicate it strongly. You can look at many of the global companies, the bigger ones, and even some of the born global smaller ones, how they do their communication about where their businesses are actually operated from or where they're based from. If there's a clear benefit from what country they are coming from, they usually are using it stronger. If there is not, then usually you may even have to find and look deeper into the documents of about pages or company history or even terms and conditions to see what is the actual legal entity and where they're located at. This mainly is, of course, for the digital services side. And of course, now if you would have this type of traditional export or internationalization perspective, now you are having, of course, inbound, so requests that you are getting from the markets, and then you have the proactive side where you proactively are trying to reach certain customer base or build your market presence more in the specific countries. But what really helps in a mindset way is that to really separate your business from the location or any location where your business is officially registered, or where your team members are based, or where your operations are based, or where your product development is based, into this kind of that your business is global, your business is on the cloud, it's on the internet, and then you have different aspects of where should the company headquarters be and why it should be in that country and what benefits does it have, where is the product company growth, where are the customers, the markets, where should be our support centers if we have physical support, where should our team grow over time. And these are all considerations that you should have at the very early part when you're starting to scale your business. So don't just let these things happen and come what they become. Don't just don't just make these decisions based on gut feeling or at the time when you have to make those. Have a strategic consideration and evaluation of these different things in the beginning of your growth. Make changes if you need to, but at least have a guideline there, a documented thinking behind your expansion plan, and having this born global mindset that your business is not automatically tied to any specific location, but every specific activity in your business and location should have business rationale behind it, why it is located in a certain country. Of course, it can also be as simple as founders just saying, well, I'm living here, I want my business to be here, that's the end of the story, and that's enough, because of course you have your own rationale for each of the decisions, and that's totally fine as well. But if you are looking to build then a scalable business and you are involving a lot of other parties, partners, investors, big customers, then you have to take their concerns or their questions and their needs also into consideration. And then it becomes much easier if you just think what is best for the business, and you think from that perspective and not from your personal perspective alone. So have a rationale, have a logic in place, have some kind of guidelines and basic rationale that should come also partly, or at least be aligned with your mission and vision and strategy, how you think about the markets that you are going after. So getting to very basic categorizing and thinking of the market, and specifically from the customers and growth perspective, just divide it in the simple three categories: the primary one, the secondary, and the rest. And the primary market is your priority, and basically that's where you put, let's say, I don't know, it's up to you to define, but whether that's more than 50%, 70%, 80%, but you should put majority of your focus into that priority markets. So that's where you proactively try to do, where you proactively build network. That's where you proactively localize your products and services, where you proactively try to build team and resources, where you proactively do these things, where you proactively invest money or use of resources. The secondary priority markets is still on your own focus. It's basically the countries and markets where you put some effort, whether that's 20%, 30% overall to all of those second priority markets. You look at them, you try to see the signals, you are very paying attention to those. You may do some resource allocation per country in these secondary markets or per city, and you look at what kind of traction you get, and if you get some stronger signals, you may actually move them into your priority markets, and at the same time in your priority markets, you may actually, even if with all the efforts you're trying to do, you clearly see that some of the secondary priority markets are actually performing better. You may change these, but basically you should have these consideration. And then the rest is all of the countries that you basically feel so unlikely, or you have evaluated that these are the countries that we are not putting really any effort behind to find customers there and so forth. But you're still making the product or service available for them, because at least that way you get some signals out of those markets, and you can those signals can indicate you that maybe you move them to the secondary priority markets and start looking them a bit more. But if you don't have this type of categorization, then basically you are missing the tool to have any kind of logic behind how you look at the markets. So this is a simple categorization for your markets, and then you can also apply different strategies to each of these in different ways. So, for example, you can apply licensing model in the least important markets. So it means that in addition that you let customers buy, you could actually let another company license your product or service, or you could allow them to even register the company under your name and brand locally, and give them rights to run the business, because you wouldn't be running the business anyway. It's not your primary and secondary market. So basically this would allow you to grow in the markets and get some portion of that business and get brand building and so forth without putting your own resources in place, simply because you have made that opportunity available for others. Maybe it's because you feel it's a totally different culture or very difficult culture. You don't have anyone supporting that language in a big market, whatever that may be. But if you don't make these types of opportunities available to others, then it's 100% sure that it's very unlikely that anything of that nature could emerge. It can still happen that some entrepreneur in another country sees that, oh, that's very interesting business model, business and product they're running. Let's ask if they would be willing to let us operate a business like that in our country. In the second priority category, for example, you could be using more freely the type of equity from the equity and earning from some team members to build the business in a specific country, compared to how much you would share ownership in the global business as a whole. So you could have different tools also at the compensation models. You could give certain IPR rights to bigger companies more flexibly in specific secondary category country, perhaps not to run entire business, but at least you could be more flexible in those countries. And then on the primary markets, you use your own best people, the global resources, all of the latest learnings and so forth. But at the same time, while you are focusing on the primary markets with your resources, you are still looking to get growth out of these other markets, but with a very different strategy and much less of an involvement with the businesses like that. And also it's not as crucial if you fail in those markets, but you can still get learnings from those markets. But if you just think that you only have primary path and primary countries that you are going to execute, that you are going to blanket the whole country with your own people and resources, then you're not really thinking as a born global in that sense, because regardless of who tries to do that and scale the organization, it takes significant resources and still takes significant time to ever reach that kind of scale. But if you have strategically other types of opportunity, now you are making more opportunities available for your business and also for partners and others, how the business can grow. And you can learn from each of those, and you can share the learnings between these different models as well. So, of course, the licensing model is most common in the franchise business, for example, how like the hamburger chains or many other franchise businesses have spread the world. In many countries, those are just licensed businesses, and they are not actually operated by the founding entity. So it can be the whole country license, or it can be individual store or individual product that is licensed that way. And then in all of this context, consider the dimensions, of course, geographical markets, so whether specific countries or country regions or global regions, or you can think of certain countries with a certain language, where the certain language is one market. You can think a lower end price points or higher end price point with different branding with the same product. And you can even think of like white labeling your technologies and so forth. And here, really think of other entrepreneurs. So, for example, when you as a new entrepreneur thinking of what type of business you would start, you could then actually consider that maybe I don't think of starting everything from scratch. Maybe I seek to see some of the growing startups already in the market, and maybe I can establish their local operation in my country. So there's many different aspects that make business sense, but are not really considered that often because this aspect of building the whole, doing the scaling, doing the born global markets, and doing these different strategies and how to build the organization are not that much available in this type of context of how the different strategies could be applied. So it's not only acquire investors and then spend investors' money and try to get your own people in every country to operate those businesses. There's much wider set of strategies and tools that can be considered on how to scale the business effectively. And it's on certain ways the same tools as what we covered in the first module, how to build the founding team. So you could consider how would be a founding team with local equity ownership from local operations established in a different country. So certain type of learnings you already would have how to do that from establishing your own entity in the beginning. And you already know how to work with entrepreneurial people if you manage to get this far with your establishing the operations.